Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for this morning's session. Should last around about 45 minutes. This morning, we're looking at Sage 50 accounts, and specifically, we're looking at the clear audit trail process. So explaining what it does, and obviously, we'll show you an example and a demo of how you go about doing that. Right, now just before we get started, we'll start with a little bit of housekeeping, just for those of you that may be new to webinars. So you may have seen them advertised when you've been going into Sage 50 accounts. So a lot of you may be new to maybe untie my tongue there. It may be your first session with us. So you don't need a microphone for these sessions. If you've got one, you will find it's muted automatically if you enable that, and you can't unmute yourself during the session. Any questions for us during the session today, or comments for that matter, you can submit them via the questions panel. You just need to click the little icon on your taskbar, which is down the right-hand side. It's the one that looks like the little speech bubble. Give it a click, it'll expand, and you'll have access to that box in the bottom corner there. So type in your question, your comment, click send, and we'll try and pick those up as best we can. So it may be myself who reacts to that during the session, but we're also joined by Jackie, Abby, and Matt this morning. It may be a link to one of our help articles, if that covers the answer in a lot more detail, or it's a bit more complex that may even advise you to get in touch with our support team. There's also an opportunity during the session today to download copies of the slides. Now, the slides are not detailed step-by-step guides by any stretch of the imagination. It's just what we use for presenting. If you want the detailed information, then do check out our help center. I'll tell you a little bit more about that towards the end of the session, but that's where you'll find the detailed information to help you with your software. But what we will be doing today is showing you a demonstration of the feature. Now, as normal, you will receive an email after today's session. You get that around about an hour after we finish. That will include a link. So if you need a bit of a recap, there'll be a link to this morning's recording, and there'll also be a link so you can register for our other webinars. Our timetable currently runs up to the end of February. Again, I'll tell you more about some of the sessions we've got booked in. And the other link will be to our recordings page. So if you've missed any sessions, or maybe you can't attend sessions going forward, keep the link handy, because that's where we host our recordings afterwards. So you can watch those at any time. Right, let's have a look at what we're covering in this morning's session though. So for Clear Audit Trail, we're going to explain a little bit of an introduction to it. What does it actually do? Is it right for you? Should you do it? Should you not? That's what we'll be trying to cover. We'll look at criteria. So if you do choose to clear your audit trail, so getting rid of your older transactions, what criteria do transactions need to meet to be cleared? It's not just a case of, right, you enter a date and everything prior to that is removed. Transactions need to meet specific criteria. So we'll outline that. We'll look at the steps for preparing. So what can you do to get the most benefit from clearing your audit trail, i.e. get rid of as much as you possibly can. So we'll look at that. So how can you tidy up your data? And then we'll run through a straightforward demonstration. So showing you what the clear audit trail looks like. It's not the most engaging, it's a nice simple wizard. And for many of you, when you run through that, depending how many transactions you have, it'll just be a case of sitting watching a progress bar. So not a lot to it. But we then want to cover, why haven't my transactions cleared? One of the most common questions relating to clear audit trail, other than should I clear it, should I not? It's where you've cleared the audit trail and you go back and think, well, I've still got those transactions, why haven't they been removed? So we'll cover that in a bit more detail and show you how you can troubleshoot that a little bit as well. Just at the end, we'll explain more about the additional support that's available to you, outline the upcoming webinars a little bit as well. And then if there are any outstanding questions, we'll try and pick up those as well. So quite a jam-packed session. I think we're scheduled in for 45 minutes. We'll see if we can get that probably within around about half an hour today. It's not a massive, not a lot to clearing the audit trail, but again, you might have questions surrounding it. So let's get started with a little bit of background as to what Clear Audit Trail actually does. Now, a lot of people think that Clear Audit Trail, or when you run the year end, that it'll get rid of your older information for you, and year-end doesn't do that. It doesn't get rid of old records or old transactions. These are the additional tasks, what we term the optional tasks. So if you've attended a year-end session, you may have seen some of those mentioned. So clearing your audit trail, getting rid of old records, etc. So this is just, I suppose, part one of a series of tasks that you might want to complete to get rid of older information and tidy up your accounts. So the clear audit trail option itself, it removes transactions from your audit trail that meet specific criteria. Obviously, we'll be alluding to that criteria in just a few minutes. So when I'm talking about the audit trail, we're talking about your list of transactions. So if I just quickly share my screen for a second there. So when we're in Sage 50 accounts, if we go down to transactions, this is your audit trail. So these are the transactions. So you'll have a list of journals, bank payments, receipts, invoices. So all of your transactions, so whether you enter that via the bank, the journals, if you've entered invoices and updated those to the ledgers. So all of these transactions, these are the transactions that appear on the likes of your customer activity, your supplier activity, your nominal activity, your bank activities. So it's this basically this list of transactions. So that's what you term your audit trail. So we're looking at using a process or this little wizard to clear transactions from that audit trail. Right, let's head back to the slides for a minute or two. So as I say, it removes those transactions from the audit trail that meet certain criteria. Now what it will do for any transactions that are removed, if necessary, it will post an opening balance journal. Now you would only ever see that against nominal records and bank accounts. You don't see that against customers or suppliers. And it also creates an audit trail history, so a list of those transactions that are removed for you. Now the common questions surrounding Clear Audit Trail, other than, well, I've listed probably the key ones. First of all, probably the most common one, particularly if you've been trained by your predecessor in the role that has maybe worked there a long time. Have you got to clear the audit trail? No, is the simple answer to that one. You don't have to run Clear Audit Trail. Now there is a guideline, never used to be, but there is a guideline for Sage 50 accounts of a guideline of 250,000 transactions. So if you're getting towards that, you may start seeing prompts pop up relating to data management. Now, it's not a hard limit, that. So if you, maybe some of you have already gone beyond that, some of you are approaching it and thinking, oh, I better clear the audit trail, because Michael said 250,000 was the limit. It's just a recommendation. So beyond that, ideally, you want to clear, I suppose, start clearing information down. It can affect for performance, basically. So have you got to? No is the answer, but if you are approaching that limit, it is recommended. When would you clear audit trail? Well, if you're going to run it, and you can run clear audit trail at any time, you would normally run it immediately after running your year end. You don't have to run it then. As I say, you can run it at any time, but normally if you're going to do it, you would do it after running your year end. How often? Again, probably once a year. You run it after running year end, but you can do it as often as you want. You might clear to a certain date and then think, well, actually, 2 months into your new financial year, for instance, you might think, right, I'll clear to that date again, see if I can get rid of any more information that might meet the criteria now. Pros and cons wise, well, obviously, if you do clear audit trail, it reduces the number of transactions you have. The fewer transactions you have, the more efficient your software is going to run. So things like checking your data, the less there is, going to be quicker because there's less to check. Your backups are going to be that bit smaller. So again, that process would be quicker. But just general use of the software, the less you have, the easier it's going to be. So scrolling up and down lists, running reports, they should run that bit more efficiently. Now, the downside of that is that you're clearing your audit trail, so you're removing your history. Now, a lot of people will sort of ask, well, right, well, what about HMRC? And people will quote, I need 6 or 7 years worth of transactions. Yeah, you need access to that information, and that might be something, if you've archived your data, you can readily access. But in your live information, your live company, you don't necessarily need that information listed on a day-to-day basis. You don't need to see it. If you did need it, you can pop into a company archive and you can check that information that was in your data at the time when the archive was created. Now, if you're not familiar with archives, there is a webinar recording on that one. So again, watch out for that one. It'll be on the list, on the recordings list, where the link is included on your follow-up email. Now, we will come back to those common questions a little bit later on. Now, criteria-wise, let's just quickly try and run through this. The number one element of that criteria, I suppose the key one there, is that when you go to clear the audit trail, it's going to ask you, when do you want to clear up to? So you can choose that date. So it'll only consider removing transactions that meet the other criteria as well, but they must be dated on or before the date that you specify. So you can choose that. Now, it must be dated prior to your current financial year. It will not let you enter a date within or even after your current financial year in Sage Accounts. It's got to be a date prior to your financial year. But how far back you need to your live data to go in your live company, only you can decide that. Transactions must be marked as having been fully paid. So if it's an invoice on a customer's account, it's got to be flagged as paid. Similar on supplier accounts as well. You might have an invoice and a credit note which are for the same value, but actually you haven't allocated them together, so those transactions are outstanding, so it will not clear them because they're not flagged as being paid. If it's a bank transaction, it must be bank reconciled. If it's classed as being VATable for your specific VAT scheme, it must also be flagged as being VAT reconciled, so it must have been accounted for on a VAT return. Now, some of the more unusual criteria, I don't often come across this one, but if anyone's using the CIS module, if it's a CIS transaction, so it's flagged as a CIS transaction, it must be CIS reconciled. If anyone's using the charities option and you've got gift aid transactions, so you might have received donations, etc., which are flagged for gift aid, again, it's going to be gift aid reconciled. And also the final one, which can catch people out, is if your transaction is allocated, so again, going back to a customer where you've got an invoice and you might have a receipt. So where transactions are allocated, so they're linked together, all transactions in that link must also meet all of the criteria for any of those transactions that are linked to be cleared. Now, I've got an example just to try and explain what I mean by that. So here we've got an invoice in this example, which is dated in December 2022, just for £100. It's flagged as being paid. It's not a bank transaction, so it doesn't need to be bank reconciled, but we're going to say it's VATable, and it's actually flagged as being VAT reconciled. Now, the corresponding receipt on the same customer account is dated January 23. Again, £100. It's not bank reconciled, doesn't need to be VAT reconciled. Now, if you were to clear the audit trail up to the end of December 2022, the invoice would meet the criteria that we've listed so far, but the receipt doesn't. And because they're allocated, they're linked together, it would mean that neither transaction could be cleared. So in this case, the receipt, it's not bank reconciled. If it was, and you cleared to a date, let's say to the end of January 2023, then as long as both transactions meet all of that criteria, then they could be removed. So I just really wanted to cover that because that's probably the more complex part of clearing the audit trail, having that understanding. Right, now preparation-wise, there's not a lot to it. Check your data, take a backup. It will prompt you to check your data and backup during the clear audit trail process. Maybe archive your data as well. So bear in mind that you are going to be clearing all the information that you no longer need listed in your live set of data. So create an archive that if you did need to refer back to the old information, you could simply pop into the company archive, the relevant one, and see that information. Print your reports. Now I've put if required there because let's face it, if you're clearing the audit trail, you're getting rid of information that you no longer need. So do you actually want reports on information that you no longer need? Allocate your transactions together. So in the previous example where you might have an invoice and you might have a credit note or let's say a payment on account, make sure they're allocated. You want to tidy up those accounts. Otherwise, if the transactions are flagged as outstanding because they haven't been allocated, they will not be cleared. I've mentioned there, reconcile your bank accounts. Again, that was part of the criteria. If it's a bank transaction, it needs to be flagged as bank reconciled. Now, there may be certain records, certain bank records that you think, well, actually, I don't reconcile that one. In fact, you might not reconcile any of your bank accounts. You might just do it manually or let your accountant deal with all that. So because the transactions need to be flagged as reconciled, there is an option if you don't use the reconciliation option where you can just switch that option off. So it's something that doesn't need to be considered. And then the final bullet point there is reconcile your VAT return. Now, chances are for the information you're going to be getting rid of, they would have been included on a VAT return. Now, since the introduction of making tax digital in the UK, you've had to generate your VAT return and submit it online via software. So these days, most people will have reconciled a VAT return on Sage accounts. What we found in that historically, where before MTD, is that people would just generate a VAT return manually. They might run some reports, but because you could log on to the gateway or you could do a paper submission and just fill in the figures yourself, then you might have found that actually you were generating a VAT return, you've submitted a period, but you haven't flagged the transactions as reconciled. Now, quick question from Gareth there, and I think Abby's picking that up, but quick question there, can you undo your clear audit trail if you change your mind? You assume not. Yeah, the preparation task, and this is one of the reasons when we go through the wizard in just a moment, that it will prompt you to back up. The only way you can undo a clear audit trail is by restoring prior to completing that process. So the idea is you're getting rid of that information that you no longer need. If you need to undo that so that you've got that information in your live company, the only way you can undo that is by restoring that backup. Lisa, you've got your question there as well. If you're not VAT registered, do you still need to do a VAT reconciliation? The answer to that one would be no, because your transactions would not need to, they wouldn't have a VATable tax code against them, or you wouldn't expect them to, and therefore they don't need to be flagged as VAT reconciled because they're not classed as being a VATable transaction. So again, it would just ignore that criteria. I'm assuming you're entering everything with a T9 tax code. So that will be fine. You can ignore that one. Right, let's get stuck into some demonstrations then, just to have a look at what the process looks like. I've got two tips on the screen and I can't emphasize this one enough, to think first. So think about what you're about to do. Two things I would want you to have a good think about is, first of all, are you sure you want to clear the audit trail? Remember, it's optional. That's the key thing with clear audit trail. It is optional. So are you sure? Are you sure you want to get rid of all the information from your live company? Yes, you've got an archive that you can always jump into if you needed to view all the information that's been removed from your live company, but Do you want to be in that position? So are you sure? And secondly, if you are sure that you want to clear the audit trail, how far back do you need your live data to go to? So yes, you're always going to have your current financial year and your transactions, but how far back would you want your live information to go that you can easily reference if necessary? The previous financial year, the one before that, 4 years before that? That's up to you to decide. If you're unsure about should you clear the audit trail or not, don't bother, don't do it. But yes, benefits wise, it gets rid of older information and it can improve efficiency. So have a bit think about that. Remember, our support team's on hand if you need to discuss that. But have a good think about it beforehand. Don't just think, oh, I've attended the webinar, I know what I'm doing, I'm going to clear the audit trail, I'm going to clear up to this prior to the start of my current financial year. And then before you know it, you've got a supplier chasing a payment for an invoice that you've never even entered, or query on a customer's account from 2 years ago. So how far back do you need that live data to go? That's the key question. Right, anyway, let's switch across to my company and we'll start with a quick demo. Now, there was a question earlier, where do I see how many transactions I've got? Well, two things to look at. If we go into help within your software, we go into about. It'll just load this page. And if I scroll down a little bit, we can see in the data information, it says splits 5088. And currently, because I've never cleared the audit trail, it corresponds with this number at the bottom, very bottom right-hand corner. That's the last transaction number that I've got on my transactions list. So are you anywhere near that 250,000? I suppose that's the question. And again, that's not a hard limit, that is a recommendation. So it's the splits, specifically it's the splits that you're after. You may find that the headers, etc., it differs, but it's the splits that you'd be interested in. Have you ever cleared the audit trail? Well, on the configuration information section, clear audit trail, mine says N/A, not applicable. So it means I've never done it. If yours has got a date in, then it has been run at some point. So if you just need to check that information, that's where you'll find it. So bear in mind, I've got 5,088 transactions currently. So it tells me this. Right, now to clear the audit trail, I'm going to need everyone else to log out of Sage Accounts. So if your colleagues are working on your company, they're going to need to log out while you do this. To access Clear Audit Trail, we go into Tools, Period End, first option there, Clear Audit Trail. It tells me it closes any other open windows. So we'll just click yes to that. And it's going to launch the Clear Audit Trail window. Now, depending on your version, you may not have this section at the bottom. You may be on a really old version. So in which case it would look quite a bit different. But the Clear Audit Trail, nice and simple. First of all, it outlines some of that criteria that we've just mentioned. Now it says a note here, we recommend you keep at least one financial year of live data. So bear in mind, you can't enter a date within your current financial year. So what I'm going to do is my financial year, and you'll see this on the status bar at the bottom, it starts January 2024. So it runs to the end of December 2024. I might even have 2025 transactions entered now. But that's what my financial year is currently. So I couldn't enter a date here from the 1st of January 2024 onwards. I've got to enter a date prior to it. Now what it will do is it will default to the last day prior to the start of your previous financial year, meaning that I've got all of my current financial year's transactions, plus I'm going to have all of last year's. You might think, actually, I need even more than that. Maybe you need less than that. But that's the suggested date. Obviously, you can type it in, or just click on the little calendar and choose the date that you want to clear up to. Now this bottom section, which may or may not be displayed for yourself, it depends if you do the bank reconciliation and also how up to date it is. So what this is doing is it's giving me a list of bank accounts and it's saying, right, well, you've never reconciled these ones. It may be that you reconcile them at some point, but actually the date that you last reconciled up to is prior to this date. So potentially if I've got transactions against the bank deposit account from, let's say, even 2021 as an example, so they'd be prior to this, but if I've never reconciled the bank account, it would mean the transactions on that account aren't reconciled and therefore would not meet that criteria. Now, if you've got bank accounts, I've got these two here and I think, well, actually, I get very little activity against those accounts, so I don't receive a statement for them. I'm just going to turn off the bank reconciliation for these ones. So I'll just tick those boxes in this instance because I don't reconcile them. So if I'm happy with that, I then just click Clear Audit Trail. Now, as I mentioned, you're going to be forced to take a backup. If I just cancel out of that and think, oh, I'm not going to do that, you do get that data management message saying you must back up your data to run this option. So going back to, whose question was it? Gareth's question from earlier, can you undo the Clear Audit Trail? The only way you can do it is by restoring that backup. Obviously, it would take you back to the point in time when you've taken that backup. So it's forcing you to take a backup just in case. So it tells me you must back up. So I'll just click yes to that. It takes me back to that backup screen. I'm just going to back up my data files in this instance. That's where it's going to remove information from. It's not going to remove any other information from the other areas. File name, whatever you want to call it. It'll call it Sage Accounts. It'll have your company name in there. So mine's just called CAT for Clear Audit Trail. It'll then have your date in reverse order and then the time that you've accessed that option. If you want to rename it, so I'll just put my initials in and I'll put pre-cat and I'm going to clear up to 31st of the 12th, 2022. So I'll just give it a decent file name just so I can recognize what that is. And I'm just going to pop that on my desktop. So you can browse, choose your location. We'll click OK. Does prompt you, would you like to check your data before you back up? Now mine's really quick, so I'm just going to click yes. You click yes, I would always recommend that. Click yes, let it run through. Just if you need to, you can sit and stare at that progress bar or go make yourself a cuppa while it's running through. So no problems to report on my data files. Now, if you did have any errors, warnings or comments, you can click the relevant tab down the side here to find out. It would list what the error, warning or comment was. There's a help option in the top corner there. Give it a click and then it'll explain about the error, warning or comment, what it means, what you need to do about that. But no problems in my instance. So we'll click close. It runs through, again, taking the backup. It's incredibly quick on mine because I've only got just over 5,000 transactions. We'll OK that. And then you'll see we get this progress bar doing its thing at the bottom here. Now, again, it's really quick on mine. I'm working on quite a powerful laptop today. It's all local data just on my hard disk. And again, I've just got a relatively small set of data. Now it's telling me in my example, 1,290 transactions have been removed from my audit trail. Would I like to view the details? If I do, I can select the checkbox. Just OK that. It'll generate the report. Now I might not want to do anything with that one. I might just export it and save it as let's say I pop it on the desktop and I'll just call it cleared transactions. See if I can type today. And I might even put a date in as well. And I'll just save that. So I've got a PDF copy of that report should I need it. But again, bear in mind, it's got rid of the information that you've decided you no longer want. A quick question from Gareth there as well, asking how fast should you check data in your backups take? There's no definitive answer for that one, Gareth. If you've got 150,000 transactions, which you mentioned, then I would think probably 5 minutes is actually quite normal. If you're running across networks, things like that, depending on things like virus guards, speed of the PC, speed of the network connection, you may find it takes even longer. So there's no definitive list on that. Just let it run. Now, in this instance, we're returned back to the Clear Audit Trail screen then. Now, you notice the bank accounts option has disappeared from the bottom there. So when you come in, this might be actually what it looks like. You might not get the bank accounts mentioned at the bottom. Again, it would just prompt you for a date. So that's absolutely fine. I can close out now, and that's the process done. Now, for those of you that you might think, oh, hold on a minute. Michael's now got more transactions. It says 5133. This is not how many transactions I have. What this is saying is this is the last transaction number. So 5133 in case. Remember, we'd never cleared the audit trail, and we had 5,088 transactions. Now, if I go back to help and then about, just let that load. We scroll down, you can see the splits has actually reduced. So it's telling me this is the number. Still telling me this is the last transaction number, 5133, which is what this is. But it's telling me splits, you've got 3,843 transactions. So we've gone down from 5088 to 3843. So it can have a big impact. Obviously, the more you prepare, the more you tidy up, then the more chances it is going to clear that in. It's going to be more effective and get rid of as much as it possibly can. So that's the Clear Audit Trail in a nutshell. But I want to go back to what I mentioned at the start. One of the most common questions is when you've run Clear Audit Trail, a lot of people get in touch with our support team and they'll query, well, why hasn't this transaction cleared? So we've got a great guide in our help center, which I've included a link to, nice and easy to find that anyway. And again, Janet, your question, what are headers and usages? Just again, have a look in our help center. It'll explain that in detail. So headers, splits, and usages, it'll explain that. So just search for one of those key terms. It'll explain that for you. So as I say, it's one of the most common questions. You've cleared audit trail and you're thinking, well, I've got some old transactions. Why haven't they cleared yet? So think about that criteria that we looked at earlier. So first of all, what's your transaction number? So if you're looking on a customer's account and you're thinking, right, there's a transaction there. It's prior to the date I cleared up to. I would have expected it to clear. Why hasn't it? So starting point, you can easily check the basic criteria. Get into your transactions and check that criteria list that we mentioned earlier. But then beyond that, it might be something obvious staring you in the face. But do all linked transactions meet that criteria as well? I'll come back to that one in a moment. So just taking an example, if we pop into transactions on my list of transactions, and I'll go right to the beginning of my audit trail. And you can see transaction number 1. It's an invoice. It's dated in 2014. So why hasn't that cleared? So remember that criteria. So we know it's prior to the date that we specified. That's probably the prime criteria there. If we scroll along, we can check some of the other criteria. So first of all, is it paid? So in the paid column, it's got an N indicating it's not. So it's not fully paid yet. We can see it's not a bank transaction. It's an invoice, that one. So it doesn't need to be bank reconciled. And it is a vatable transaction in this case. We've entered it with a T1 tax code. So it looks like it needs to be VAT reconciled, but it's got an R in the VAT column. So it indicates it's reconciled. So in this case, we can see straight away, this one isn't paid, so it hasn't met all of that criteria. Now you may be looking and actually you just cannot work out. You might look on this page, you've checked the basic criteria and you think, well, I cannot work it out. It seems to meet that criteria. So what I would say in that position is, if I go back to the slides, there's a help article that I've included the link to. It's available obviously from our help center. So why has Clear Audit Trail not removed some transactions? On that article, there is a report that you can download. Well, it's a backup of a report that you restore that backup of that one report into your software. And then all you would do is you would run that report up to the date that you've cleared the audit trail up to, and it would list your transactions. So it would list them and it would give you and it would identify the reason why. Now, if you've checked the basic criteria, it's probably going to be the allocated transaction against it. Maybe that doesn't meet the criteria. So a bit like that example we looked at earlier, where we had the invoice and the receipt. So yeah, all of the linked transactions must meet that criteria to be removed. So do check that. Now, I'm not going to run that report on mine today because it takes forever. Even though I've got a little list of transactions, I've only got just over 5,000. It is a lengthy report. We'd just be sat watching a progress bar while it runs. But if you need it, that's where you'll find it. Help Center. If you've downloaded the handout, that link will work for you, but otherwise just search for Clear Audit Trail and it'll bring up an article on how to clear the audit trail, but also it'll bring up this article as well. Why is Clear Audit Trail not removed some transactions? So Lisa, your question there as well is, can you rerun the Clear Audit Trail to the same date? So if you've cleared audit trail and you think, well, actually, this invoice here, maybe it wasn't paid, but on that account, I've now gone in and I've allocated transactions to it. So I've just tidied things up. Yes, you can, is the answer to that one. So you would just go back in, and if I just quickly share my screen. So let's say I've tidied that one up. And I could go back in, tools, period end, clear audit trail. And again, you could specify whatever date you want. So if you want to leave it as that, that's fine. So, but again, try with that preparation stage. Tidy up before you go as far as clear audit trail. Suppose if you go the other way, it will give you an idea what you're left with is what you need to tidy up, if anything. So you can do that if necessary. Right, let's just quickly head back to the slides. We'll have a bit of a recap on those common questions that we covered at the beginning. So first of all, have I got to? No, it's optional. You do not have to clear the audit trail. When would you do it? Usually, if you're going to run it, you would run it after your year end. How often? Again, probably just once a year, but again, just going back to Lisa's question, you could rerun it time and time again if you needed to. So as I progress through my financial year, I might think, well, actually, more and more of that older information is probably going to meet that criteria as we go forward. We might just keep clearing, maybe as part of my month-end process. I might clear audit trail to the end of December 2022. Then when I get into my next financial year, again, I might sort of advance that to clear up to the end of 2023. Pros and cons. Obviously, the less information you have, the more efficient your software is going to run. But the downside is you're losing your history from your live company. But that's not the end of the world. If you've archived your data or you've taken backups, you could always refer to that one for the older information that's been removed if needed. Right, just in the last 5 minutes, if you've got any final questions, I think the guys are just about on top of those. So if you weren't quite with us at the start of the session, or if your phone rang and you missed part of it, if you've got any questions, click that little speech bubble icon, get your question typed in. Remember to click send. We're just about on top of them all there, so you should get a quick answer. There is the opportunity to download a handout during the session today. Do take that opportunity if you need it. If you want the step-by-step guide, that's in our help center. Help center wise, loads of information in there, nice and easy to access. You can simply open your browser, head along to sage.co.uk/help. You can start browsing what we term the support hubs, so those little panels on the bottom part of the screen there, or you can click into the search box, so the likes of Clear Audit Trail, just type some keywords in that search box, and then obviously click your little magnifying glass and it should find the top 10 articles for that area for you. But loads of great information in there. Just to bring your attention to our next digital badge that we're offering in February. So the theme for that one will be banking excellence. So we've got 8 sessions or 8 different topics, all themed around the bank accounts area in Sage. I've got a little video which I'll play. It's our Matt, who will just tell you a little bit about it. I'll set that going and then we'll come back and pick up some more questions.
We have some exciting news for 50 accounts users. Are you ready to revolutionize your banking experience? Join us for an incredible journey through 8 sessions from February the 4th right through to the 20th, designed to streamline processing and enhance efficiency. Simply attend 6 out of the 8 sessions and the quiz to test your knowledge, and you will earn your very own Digital Banking Excellence badge. This will be added to the new Accredible portal, where you can collect and manage all your badges. From here, you can share your badges with colleagues, clients and suppliers to show your progression to becoming a Sage expert. Imagine a world where your bank transactions are simplified. Now, throughout these sessions, you'll dive deep into topics like simplifying bank transactions, managing customer receipts and supplier payments, mastering bank reconciliation, and revolutionizing your bank by automating with bank feeds. We'll show you how to simplify your routine with bank recurring items and how to correct bank errors. Harness the power of e-payments and add your bank information to invoices for faster payments. Don't forget, to earn your digital badge, you need to attend at least 6 out of these 8 sessions and complete the quiz. Transform the way you work with the bank, get paid faster and automate your processing with Sage 50 accounts.
Okay, I'm back live with you at that point. So remember, if you are wanting to sign up for any of our webinars, including the Banking Excellence webinar series, just watch out for your follow-up email. It will include the link to our registration page. They're all free to attend. Attend as many as you want. If you can't attend a session, then recordings are available and they will be made available afterwards. So that's nothing in the world. Right, now it sort of brings us towards the end of the session. We've just about picked up all of the questions that we've had today, so hopefully you've got an answer to those. Follow-up email will be with you in round about an hour's time, so watch out for that one, including the recording of this morning's session if you need a bit of a recap. So if you did get interrupted or missed any of it, you'll have that available to you. And as you leave, there'll be a little survey pop up. It should take you about a minute to complete that. If you can do that, it'd be greatly appreciated. So if you want to rate the webinar, rate what we've covered, if you've got any thoughts or ideas that you want to share with us, maybe topics that you'd like to see covered going forward, certain areas of your software that maybe you're not that familiar with or maybe you struggle with, then let us know. Hopefully we can either book some webinars in or possibly just point you in the right direction. But if you can take that minute to complete that survey, greatly appreciate it. We'd love reading those comments just to see if we've hit the mark or not. Right, we'll end the webinar at that point. Many thanks for your time this morning. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully it makes your accounting journey just that a little bit easier. You've got a better understanding. Maybe you're going away today thinking, well, actually, I understand it. I'm not going to clear the audit trail. Great. Maybe you think, well, actually, I do want to clear the audit trail. So hopefully you've got the confidence going forward. So many thanks. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you on some other webinars very soon. Many thanks.